Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. And I really appreciated learning more from the Pueblo of Santa Ana about all that they're doing associated with range management. Today, I'll be discussing water resource management in the Navajo Nation with the understanding that the audience members have, a lot of interest in wildlife management on the range lands as it may relate to the forage available in these areas or the livestock or wildlife that graze them. And I'll further describe our water resource management in the Navajo Nation in collaboration with partners. So she crystal Tulley-Cordova Yanishet which eating the Schlant Zatni Bushes Chin Hashkan Hedzoha Edasha Chet or Higlini Edashanala Bistok Legendesh Dent Nasha. So I'm of the Bitterwater clan born for the Tangle People clan. My maternal grandfather's clan is the yucca fruit strung on a line, and my paternal grandfather's clan is the water that flows together. And I have a great opportunity to grow up on the Navajo Nation with this philosophy, and it means water is life in English, but in our language, it means a lot more than that because water is all that we are as occupants on the land related to our relatives within the ecosystem that we live on. So it's inclusive of wildlife, it's inclusive of the plants that may be available across the land, like the saplings in the Chusca Mountains. It's also inclusive of the food that we may grow or the medicinal plants that we use or the sheep that we have within our families or other livestock or wildlife that we depend on as well. And this is what our water cycle looks like. It's important to have an understanding of this because, many of us probably learned in 4th grade of what this water cycle looked like. But when you grow up on lands that tribes have occupied for time immemorial, it creates a different relationship with it. So, everything from the perennial and ephemeral streams to the lakes that exist throughout this area, as well as the springs, the groundwater and evapotranspiration, as well as the precipitation. It's important to note that all of these water types are significant features to many tribes, nations, and pueblos throughout the United States, as well as Alaska Native villages are in dependency on water. And with that being said, the Navajo Reservation was established in 1868. Through the Treaty of 1868, you can see on the map on the right what the land looked like in 1868, and through different executive orders, through Navajo advocacy, that land base has grown over the years to span over 27,000 square miles across Utah, Arizona, New Mexico. We also have ranch lands in Colorado now as well. And with that being said, we are the largest land-based tribe and more recently the largest populated tribe. And we straddle both the upper and the lower Colorado River Basin. We also have lands on the eastern side of the Navajo Nation that are within the Rio Grande Basin. But when you're a tribe that covers different states, but also spans the way the Colorado River is set up, the upper and the lower, that can provide challenges associated with water resource management. The primary water source that we've relied upon has been groundwater, although that has been diversifying with resolving our water rights in the Navajo Nation. And the population from Census 2010 has been over 173,000. We have 110 communities throughout the Navajo Nation. The gray area is the Hopi tribe, so that also creates challenges associated with management across the landscape. And it's important to note the population because that also has implications for rangeland management, how that occurs, and just having that understanding as well. But also important factors are rural living when we begin to think about water resources. And this is the community of Blue Gap, Arizona. The assets have been good grazing, although with continued drought conditions, that has changed to be overgrazed areas. And what you see there is the community of Blue Gap. But when you zoom in, you can see a community that I grew up in, where my paternal side of my family is from. And what's important to note that this land base is not consistent of subdivisions, but large spreading out of different areas. You see the homestead, you can see the tree that was grown in the front, but then you can also see the corral in those areas. And when this gives you a sense of not only how the water may run off the land, as you can see through those drainage areas, but also, what forage might be available or unavailable in these areas related to precipitation, which I'll further describe in my presentation. It's important to note also some of the history associated with the area. This area had uranium mining, and now we're dealing with those legacy mining issues. And it's important to note this because this history has challenged the water source availability, the water quality, as well as the livestock or wildlife that may depend on different water sources. And just to note, from 1944 to 1986, nearly 30 million tons of uranium ore were extracted from Navajo lands. EPA has mapped over 521 abandoned uranium mines, and then the Navajo Nation banned uranium mining in 2005. But although those actions had ended as far as mining, what is important to note that uranium and arsenic, there are some uranium and arsenic related issues for unregulated water. That means non-potable water. The map on the left is from work done by our friends at Northern Arizona University that evaluated on the western side of the Navajo Nation different unregulated well systems. And what you can see is that there were exceedances for uranium and arsenic for those water supplies. And not only do livestock drink this, but when you have a population of people with 30% of people, when 1 in 3 households don't have piped water, that they rely on these resources. And so it's important to have an understanding that it can have health impacts with the water source availability. So with that being said, in collaboration with academic institutions, we've been able to evaluate our water quality in different ways. This is a recent paper that came out this month, and it's in the Impact magazine. Well, on the right, what you see is a dashboard interactive map, and then on the bottom figures a data dashboard associated with this. So this is a compilation of existing data sets. For potable water, it's easy to note that that information is regulated through Environmental Protection Agency. And what's less known are the unregulated sources. But through this compilation of data sets from different sources, from scholars, as well as federal partners that have published data, that this product could be able to be developed through the partnerships of the University of New Mexico, as well as Montana State University, Northern Arizona University, UCLA, and University of Arizona and the Southwest Research and Information Center. And it's important to note, what your water quality is evaluated at, because that can impact the availability, what might be within the forage, because oftentimes we hear we are what we eat. And so the same could be said for plants and animals for their uptake because they rely on water just like we rely on water. And so having that understanding of that water quality is crucial. In the Navajo Nation, through different partnerships, we have the opportunity to build our capacity and resources that we have. And, you know, our little department doesn't have the capacity and doesn't have the resources to be able to do all the things that I'm describing today, but through the partnerships with federal, state, academic institutions, as well as non-governmental organizations, we're able to do a lot more. And on the upper right-hand corner, what you see is a map of Arizona. The Navajo Nation is the gray area. The colors of salmon, orange, and yellow are the total dissolved solid. Basically, if you are familiar with the term brackish water, salty water essentially. And we have that on the southwestern region of the Navajo Nation. And so we don't have challenges really associated with water production in this area, but more so water quality. And so through a partnership with the University of Arizona, we are able to look at technology to improve water quality for the different communities throughout the area. And, you know, associated with that, improving that water quality can be waste. And through efforts with Dr. Carletta Chief and her other colleagues at the University of Arizona, there's opportunities for brine management to be able to use what would just be disposed of as waste and be able to use it for something like agriculture and have off-grid production for safe drinking water. And then on this far right, we have the opportunity to have a better understanding of our groundwater as well as surface water and water chemistry data in the Black Mesa area. But so this is inclusive of the Coconino Aquifer as well as the Navajo Aquifer. And these are deep aquifers that we rely upon for Navajo communities, not only for human use, but for other water uses as well. And so having an understanding about what the characteristics of groundwater are important for us as far as long-term sustainability. On the bottom right, on the bottom left is a project that we're doing in collaboration. We have many projects that are ongoing with the Army Corps of Engineers. The different color shading denotes that of the different district offices that the Navajo Nation has to work with. Because of our large area with our different federal partners, we have to work with multiple agencies in order to get things done. And so for projects, in the LA district, we're evaluating 4 different sub-watersheds within the Little Colorado River. We're evaluating Jedito, Aribe, and Denahoto watersheds, evaluating some of those aspects. Along the eastern side of the Chusca Mountains with the Albuquerque district, we are evaluating the watershed region in that area. Recently, we've completed an evaluation of the Laguna Creek area in the Kayenta region, evaluating what some of those challenges are. Having an understanding of these watershed characteristics lets us have an understanding of, you know, what might be limitations associated with rangeland management or water availability. We do have, as an example, there are opportunities to dam water, but at the same time in regions like Kayenta and Denahoto, there are sedimentation issues that challenge the infrastructure that may be set up to retain water. And so it's important to have knowledge of watershed characteristics as it may have implications for increased costs for operation and maintenance, etc. The bottom right-hand corner is an opportunity that we are participating in with Professor Lonnie Tsinajini at the University of New Mexico. What is shown in the A, B, and C is hydrologic modeling, groundwater modeling. It's difficult to know what's going on below the surface, and our office doesn't have the resources to be able to conduct modeling and having a better understanding of what's going on below the surface. Because as I mentioned, we are very familiar that water is connected in a water cycle. And so, you know, oftentimes just knowing information about precipitation is not sufficient to know about what may be recharging perennial ephemeral sources, but also groundwater or springs, which livestock and wildlife rely upon for sustainability and vitality. More recently, what the Navajo Nation has been challenged with, as many other places, has been the drought, and both short-term and long-term drought. And this is the U.S. Drought Monitor from June 2021. And you can see, you know, it was significantly dry in this area, showing severe to exceptional drought conditions. It's important to note that we like to use different tools that are available to us through different partnerships to better understand what's going on across the region of the Navajo Nation, because there's opportunities that can help us allocate resources to address those challenges. And this is one of the tools that we use. In addition to that, we've also partnered with NASA and the Desert Research Institute. Also toggle back here, because what you see here is just the state boundaries and the county boundaries. But what's important to us as a tribe is having an understanding of those community boundaries and how drought conditions across this area may be impacting different communities more so than others. And we rely on a 6-month SPI index, especially for drought declarations. And this information was useful for reaffirming the drought in 2001, and made the recommendation to the Emergency Management Commission, and which made the recommendation to the president of the Navajo Nation for that reaffirmation of the drought. This tool is called a Drought Severity Evaluation Tool, and you can also conduct time series, which is also useful for us to be able to look at different time periods and compare different years compared to others. And what you see during this period of record, that June 2001 was the summer that year was significantly less as far as the SPI, meaning the drought was more severe than the 2020. Our department also is engaged in stream gauging efforts. There are USGS stream gauges across the area, but not all across the region. And so there are certain streams that we are interested in collecting information for, and those are denoted in the red triangles. And having an understanding of what the flow is in ephemeral and perennial streams gives us the knowledge of what interannual as well as intraannual variability may look like. We also conduct snow surveying across the Chusca Mountains as well as the Defiance Plateau. And I'll just also note that this information is also useful for having an understanding of the climate change impacts in this region. There have been acknowledgements of, you know, that predictions a decade or so ago or more that, you know, there would be decreased snowpack, snowmelt runoff would occur earlier, but not really denoting the month. And snow surveying has been able to allow us to determine what those impacts are and be able to quantify that. And some of that work has been done in Dr. Lonnie Tsinajini's early work, where she was working on her master's, and she evaluated our snow surveying information and published that data. It's important to note that, you know, I talked about groundwater, I talked about streams, I also talked about some of the snow precipitation. But when we talk about precipitation, why is it so important to have an understanding about the changes and how that may impact different aspects within an ecosystem? But, you know, changes in precipitation definitely impact groundwater, spring, lake, and stream recharge. It can also have impact on frequency of dust migration. And we've seen in dune migration studies in the Navajo Nation conducted by USGS, what those challenges may be on the western side of the Navajo Nation. But changes of precipitation can also impact flows within streams. And what we've also seen and not shown today, but also evaluated by the Navajo Nation Department of Fish and Wildlife, is the plant and animal population changes associated with the migration of wildlife. And I'd encourage you to look at the Navajo Nation Department of Fish and Wildlife, because they have those reports on there associated with the mule deer population migration changing patterns. They have information about feral populations and what that count looks like across the Navajo Nation as well. Changes in precipitation also impact wildfires. One of our recent big wildfires was the Asai fire in the Chusca Mountains. It was over 14,000 acres. And Dr. Lonnie Tsinajini did evaluate the wildfire impacts. Although that wasn't the original focus of her research, it changed to that. And just seeing the growth that can come back with regards to the vegetation in that area, that springs are a significant contributor to regrowth after wildfire was really significant to see. And, you know, changes in precipitation can change the vegetative cover and alteration in species composition as well. So Navajo Nation has participated in further evaluation of the precipitation, and this is what the hydroclimatic regions across the Navajo Nation look like. This is an evaluation of water year 2002 to 2015 at 89 precipitation sites throughout the Navajo Nation. Our precipitation network started in the 1950s and 60s, and you know, we had as much as 200 precipitation sites, but due to resources and staffing, we are now down to 89. But this is what our climatology looks like throughout the year. June's the driest time of the year. And we have a bimodal precipitation regime where the mountainous regions get the most precipitation during the winter, whereas the rest of the regions get their precipitation during summer precipitation. And here we see the seasonal precipitation types. On top graph is winter precipitation. The water years on the x-axis and the precipitation amounts are on the y-axis. And summer precipitation is on the bottom graph, and what you can see is the trends that may fall across the regions are more in sync for winter precipitation, because those are large systems covering a large area, where the summer precipitation, the North American monsoon precipitation, is more smaller systems across that region. And then this is just looking at year-to-year comparison. There's a lot of variability as you look at the top graph. And then as you look at the bottom graph, it's looking at a summer to total annual ratio. And that just describes that summer and winter precipitation are independent of one another. This is the number of washes and creeks that run across the Navajo Nation. And it's important to have this understanding because, you know, that's associated with water rights. There are a number of unresolved water rights for the Navajo Nation, inclusive of Zuni River, Rio San Jose, Colorado River main stem, and Little Colorado River. We have settled water rights for the San Juan River Basin in New Mexico and the Navajo-Utah water rights settlement that was signed at the end of last year. But it's important to also note that, you know, a lot of what we do, the priority for our department is to address the homes without pipe water. And this is a map of the Navajo Nation The red, orange, and yellow indicate the higher number of homes that don't have pipe water. And it's important to have that understanding, because during this pandemic, that's what a lot of our work has focused on, to gain safe water access for our Navajo residents and increase the number of watering points available to these residents that didn't previously have an existing permanent watering point. And it's important to have an understanding that all of us depend on water. So everything from our dogs, our animals that we might have, to the vegetation that we rely on, but we as Navajo people rely on water as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. We got about 3 minutes for some questions. Is there anybody have any questions to ask Crystal? There's one in the chat. Lots of challenges across the Navajo Nation, but as you said, also opportunities. Really good, interesting tools. Great presentation.
I guess the only thing that I'd note on that front, I know we have some tribal participation, or maybe people that work in collaboration with tribes. It's just that, you know, we can build our capacity together, and there's great opportunities with partnerships and collaboration on different projects that we can do. And there are tools today that we have that, you know, people before us didn't have, and can make our jobs easier, but just by seeking out those tools and learning how to use them. Sometimes it's difficult for people to have a, you know, try to learn something new, but it's definitely something that's helped our tribe with our water resource management.
We have a lot of jurisdictions and a lot of communities and 3 states. It's got to be very complex. Sarah.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nick. And hey, Crystal, great presentation. I guess this kind of relates to the last point you were discussing about with working with partners. I'm curious, as far as just like your staffing needs, like how many folks do you have helping you out? And are you, like, do you feel well supported? Like, does the tribe supply a budget for you all, or do you get direct service funding from the BIA, or how does that whole end? Because it's just impressive what you've presented, and I can't imagine how challenging some of this work is. So just wondering, kind of a staffing type question, I guess.
Yeah, so our little staff is hanging in there. Sometimes I feel it's like we're putting on baling wire and duct tape to keep our little vehicle rolling forward. But I mean, our staff is very limited for what we have and what we're able to do. That's why partnership is so important to us, because it allows us to build that technical capacity that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. As far as funding resources, we've been reaching out to different opportunities. I mean, everything from philanthropic partners to federal funding for our funding. And many people may or may not know, but the Navajo Nation took a huge hit with something that was an economic contributor with the closing of the Navajo generating station and the Navajo mine. And so now we're in this transition period of trying to reach out to different funding sources that haven't previously been tapped. And now is a really interesting time, especially with the American Rescue Plan Act, and as well as the bipartisan infrastructure law, for funding that may become available for a variety of water-related projects. That's not only applicable for the Navajo Nation, but I think tribes in general.
Excellent, great, thank you.